We'll do this for now. Alright, I'm going to wait for a couple more people. I know, it's rare I actually have my shit together. Yo, Hedgehog. Yeah, we've got some original content tonight. I don't know if I want to start with it and get it out of the way, or what I want to do. I don't know. We're just gonna have to see. I'm kind of quiet again. Give me a second. I think I know what's going on here. Huh. Okay. Is this better? I can actually look. Is this better? It looks better. Do I sound like garbage? Doesn't look like I would. I'm using a new mic. There's gonna be trial and error in this shit. But yeah, just make some noise in chat if shit doesn't sound right, or if I'm too quiet, or if I'm too loud, or if I'm obnoxious, which I can't fix. You mean because of the mic, or because of any reason? You guys are not my friends because you're an echo chamber. Y'all keep me in check. You tell me when I'm sane, when I want to be told I'm crazy, and you tell me I'm crazy when I want to be told I'm sane. So I know you guys are telling me the truth. I'm kind of digging this wallpaper. Not gonna lie. Alright. Should I stall for much longer? Do I have some sort of ambient sound going? Yes, I do. I've got this. So, this is me without that. This is me with it. Without it. With it. Without it. What I could do is I could kill the white noise. New mic is working very well. Fuck yeah. It totally wasn't the first time I was working on it. Still hear rain. That's fine. Sweet. Alright, looks like we've got 3 people. Who's in? Oh, is it counting me? Son of a bitch. Don't count me. I wasn't complaining about the sound. I was just making sure your mic wasn't picking up, like, the room sounds. I mean, this... If I try typing... Like, y'all hear that shit. But that's okay, I can live with that. I personally like the sound of typing, so it takes away the pain of having to listen to my voice. So that's it. That is it. You know what? I'm gonna switch to mod view. No, it's just you, Edgehead. Oh, you meant like the fuzz noise you get from bad mics? This one doesn't seem to have it. Yeah. It's pretty clear. It wasn't the first time I used it, but I think restarting it helped. So I think I can actually have the volume up now without it sounding like you feel. Alright. I think I will start with I have no idea. I think I'll start with one of the strange tales from a Chinese studio as we wait. And then as more people come in, I'll read what I wrote. So this one is called The Haunted House. Mr. Li of Changshan, the nephew of Li Huaxi, president of the Board of Justice, was the owner of a haunted house. One day he saw a long bench on his veranda, flesh pink in color, very smooth looking and well finished. He did not recall possessing such a bench, and went up to it and touched it, letting his hand run along its curves. The thing actually felt soft, like flesh, and he walked away from it in shock and revulsion. He walked a few steps when he looked back and saw the bench move. Did I miss? No, Sassy, you didn't miss it. I actually started reading something else first to let people come in. You did not miss the home-cooked spooks. We're reading something from China first, and then we'll do that. It's not very long. The thing actually felt soft. Like flesh. Oh, shut up, Edgehead. Like flesh, and he walked away from it in shock and revulsion. He walked a few steps, and he looked back and saw the bench move on its 4 feet and gradually vanish as it merged with the wall. Next, he saw a long, shiny whitewood staff leaning against the wall. He took hold of it, and it too was so smooth that it slipped through his fingers, falling to the ground and wriggling away like a snake, until it too had vanished into the wall. Nah, you didn't miss anything. In the 17th year of the reign of Emperor Kangxi, a scholar named Wang Zhensung took up residence in Mr. Li's house, the very same house, as a family tutor. One evening, just when the lamps were lit, Wang was lying down on his couch with his shoes still on, when he caught sight of a tiny man, some 3 inches tall. Damn, he caught sight of something that was 3 inches tall, who entered the room, wandered around, and then left again. A little while later, he returned, carrying 2 small stools, which he then placed in the room. They were tiny, like miniature toys children make out of millet stalks. After another short interval, 2 more little men came in, bearing a coffin around 4 inches long, which they then placed on top of the 2 stools. As they were doing this, did Wolfie step away because I hear nothing? You don't hear anything? Oh, fuck. Do you really not hear anything? How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes. Oh, synced up to your headphones automatically? Oh, thank fuck. Okay. I'm still paranoid of my new setting, okay? I'm used to having a microphone stuck to my head, bumping into everything every time I try to scratch my fucking chin. Alright, where was I? He returned carrying 2 small stools which he placed in the room. They were tiny, like the miniature toys children make out of millet stalks. You're good. You're good, Sassy. After another short interval, 2 more little men came in, bearing a coffin about 4 inches long, which they placed on top of the 2 stools. As they were doing this, a lady entered the room with a bevy of maidservants. She was the same minuscule proportions as the others, and was dressed in mourning, with a hempen cord tied round her waist. And a length of white cotton wrapped around her head. She held her sleeve to her mouth and sobbed most piteously, making a sound a little like that of a giant fly. Tutor Wong laid there some time, watching all this through narrowed eyes. As he watched, his hair stood on end, and he felt himself enveloped in a layer of cold, like a coverlet of frost. Finally, he gave out a great cry and leaped from his bed in an attempt to flee from the room. But as he went, he tripped and landed with a clash on the floor, where he lay a gibbering wreck, quite incapable of rising to his feet. The household heard the noise and came running, but saw no sign of anyone or anything out of the ordinary. Alright. Are you guys ready for God, it would help if I could talk. Are you guys ready for homemade spooks? Spooks made in the kitchen with some salt, onion, and garlic? Are you ready for a Wolfie original that isn't the thing I wrote almost 4 years ago? Alright. Here it comes. This is called The Wrath of Crows. It was gonna be The Judgment of Crows, but I decided to change the title because I got... Edgehead knows. Edgehead decided that Wrath of Crows sounds cooler, and I agreed. So now it's The Wrath of Crows. Gotta get into character. This is a story I've mostly felt compelled to keep to myself for years and years. I thought that if I'd start yapping to every person with ears, no one would ever take me seriously again. All my research projects and publications would be dismissed as the ramblings of a lunatic, and my colleagues, my professional fellows, would have nothing to do with me. And my name would be said with scorn, embarrassment, or pity. But I'm an old man now, and all my works have been cited and reassessed, and all my so-called friends have forgotten me. And honestly, I need to talk about it. This was back a few years ago, when I was still doing work on recording the use of native flowering plants and folk medicine. Still a fun project, I remember it fondly, though my coworkers would often partake in getting high off their asses on all sorts of mushrooms or plant compounds. Maybe if I'd followed their lead, I'd been better off. Anyways, doing work on that project, I spent a few months living in a small village on the mountains called Kilowato, after the local river that flowed through the village. It's one of those quiet, out-of-the-way villages, full of people who kept to themselves and didn't tend to see many outsiders. Nevertheless, people were friendly and eager to share what they knew. Kilowato was a very old village, founded by the local tribes who'd been practicing their ways for centuries before settlers arrived. Rather than being driven out, the harsh winters and unrelenting wilderness had facilitated some cooperation and tight meshing of the natives and those fair-skinned strangers. Over time, their cultures had blended, and Kilowato's libraries were full of recorded history, of the natural history of the mountain range, as well as their language, customs, and folklore. More interesting to me, however, was that some of their traditions were very much still alive. Every house had at least one bird feeder of some kind, which, as a novice birder, I thought was delightful. Most of them were platform feeders, and those that lacked these in favor of hanging feeders of seeds and suet, they would leave supplemental food on their decks, large stones on their yards, their driveways, whatever seemed to work. Peanuts, eggs, boiled or scrambled, or even just out of the carton, dog and cat food, pieces of fish, sunflower seeds, and even bacon were among the offerings I saw presented. At first I was quite confused, as it wasn't quite the usual bird food menu, but it was less than a minute on my first morning staying in the village that I got my answer. Crows descended from the tall, dark pine trees, the wide-branched maples and oaks. Black and shimmering. And they happily ate these offerings, calling and cawing with merriment to each other, and some of them leaving gifts of shiny things, bones, bits of mushrooms, or other strange items to the people who had earned their fondness and their trust. The crows showed no fear toward most of the villagers, even playing with their children and their dogs by hopping merrily about and uttering this phrase or that, but they eyed me and my colleagues warily. "So everyone feeds the crows?" I asked Jack, a teacher who worked in Kilowato's elementary school, who happened to be hosting me on my first night there. They hadn't had the living quarters ready for us scientists when we arrived, so some accommodating locals had taken us in, and I'd had the pleasure of staying with Jack, a kindly older man with wood carvings of his own, making and decorating every room in the cabin-like house, and his shy, quiet, but attentive and affectionate wife, Lisa. Their two boys had grown up, and one of them had moved far away, the other had stayed local. "We sure do. Always have," Jack explained, taking a drink from his hot mug of black coffee and wiping his salt and pepper whiskers with the back of his hand. "Been doing that since I was a boy, and Lisa, too." "Can I ask why?" "Course you can," Jack replied with a good-natured chuckle. "But you're not gonna get just one reason back, you see. Our folk have learned for a long time that it's best to be friends with them crows. Sure, they can get themselves up into mischief, but that ain't much different than us people. Besides being a delight to just be around, they keep an eye on us and ward away misfortune. Old Jim Cornshaw fell and broke his leg in a landslide while out hiking. The crows flew and led people to him crying and screaming, clearly upset. Who knows what could have happened to him otherwise? And that was just a few months ago. And they saved little Sean's kid, what's his name, from that freak incident with the coyotes, Lisa added. They protect people who are nice to them and their families. You think they can recognize people? I asked. Incredulous? Jack chuckled, though he thought it was obvious. Seems that way, although I've never asked him myself, Jack muttered. Also, legend has it that there's a spirit that lives up the mountain who weaves the mist off the trees in the rain. We call her Weaves Mist most of the time. She's a witch. Sometimes she's young, sometimes she's old. They say she loves the crows, and those that disrespect them have been cursed before. Just then, there was a rap-tap-tap on the window. I jumped and saw a large crow. His bright, dark, beady eyes scrutinizing me, cocking his head to get a better look at me. He made a few gurgles in his throat and tapped the window again. Lisa opened the window and offered an extra strip of bacon from her hand, which he snatched eagerly. "Ha ha, Gray Spot!" Jack cackled. "Look at you, still hungry?" I noticed this bird had a single white feather on his shoulder, maybe from an old injury. "How's Dusty back? Haven't seen her in a few days." Gray Spot tilted his head, almost dog-like, clearly listening. "How wow!" Gray Spot replied. I stared, dumbstruck. "Hello," I replied, a little flustered. With that, Gray Spot turned away from me and took flight, calling to his other compatriots. "Oh, there she is," Lisa called. "Dusty Back's flying with him. What a happy pair." Sure enough, there was another crow joining him, in the air, flying close. "Hey, Katie, what's up?" "Here, I'll read chat after." After that encounter, I started paying more attention to the crows. I learned how to tell some of them apart by their markings, their behavior, their preferences, even some of their favorite noises to make. I also started leaving food out for them, finding it made some of the villagers more comfortable speaking to me. One day, I was out by the meadow, accompanied by Jack, to collect some wildflowers I intended to sample for later analysis, when we noticed some odd behavior among the crows. A whole cloud of them converged onto the field, cawing noisily, scolding. They arranged themselves in a large circle, and gradually their excitement fell into a solemn silence. A single crow was in the center of the circle. He hopped this way and that, flapped and turned, cawing and clucking and gurgling. The other birds stood, listening with rapt attention. Some exchanged glances, some repositioned their wings restlessly, but none of them made a sound. Finally, the central crow fell silent. There was a pause, and it felt like the air had grown thick, like before a storm. Then, one by one, the crows flew off. No calling, no nothing, leaving the speaker behind. "What?" I started to ask. "Huh, looks like a crow's court," Jack remarked, rubbing his beard. "Doesn't happen often." "Why do they do that?" "No one really knows," he admitted. "I imagine it's one of their flocks done some kind of wrong, and they sort of put the fellow on trial. If they're satisfied, they fly away." "What happens if they're not satisfied?" "Joe Timbers says he once saw one get picked to death at the end of a crow's court." The rest of the day, I couldn't help thinking about it. How intelligent and deliberate it all seemed. I was really the only one on the research team who was paying much attention to it. Prevailing theory at the time was birds were just feathered biological robots, acting and reacting with no thought or introspection behind the eyes, driven by the instinct of their programming. No one would give me the time of day to talk about a goddamn crow's court. Well, 9 months after I got here, Killwidow Church got a new priest, one of the larger towns a few hours away. Father Aaron Kennings. Unlike other small villages, the church really wasn't the center of life, and most of the people had a sort of casual relationship with religion. However, there was a pretty devoted portion of the population, so there he was. Kennings was a rather charismatic man, still young, with a bright twinkle in his ass-blue eyes, soft voice, and a rather poetic, graceful vocabulary. There was one thing, though, and it gave some people some pause. He disliked the crows. The crows didn't seem to like him either. Father Kenning hated those dark birds, called them unholy, symbols of the devil, dark and unsightly. He shooed them away from the church when he walked and gave them no communion on Sundays. This was a departure from the priest before him, who found the birds whimsical and adopted the customs of the town. The crows took exception to this treatment and started to stay away from the church, scolding him angrily whenever he went about his business on the street. However, they remained kind and playful as ever with their human friends, just as they had before. In fact, I continued to study the crows, and in one particular, seemed to be taking a fondness to me, and extended some trust. A younger crow I called Onyx. Oh Lord, there's a lot in the chat, hold on. Bit worn down, but one more day and you get a full day to yourself. Hang in there, Sassy, I believe in you. Not too bad, finished with school for the week, so you're vibing. Congrats for surviving another week, that goes for everyone. Gets cold going to school in a castle. Ah, Ireland. It makes more sense than it should. May seem like it would be a cool to go to school in a castle, but the people there are either chavs, cunts, or sound people. You're always going to get the miserable old teachers who are all complete cunts. How do I explain chav? Oh god, how do you explain chav? A young person of a characterized by a brash and loutish behavior. So, like, thuggish. Dickhead. Yeah, there you go. Alright, let me continue. Outside of this, however, the new priest was welcomed with hospitality and admired by the God-fearing people of Killwidow. Although Father Kennings instructed his flock to stop feeding them demon birds, pretty much everyone politely ignored it, or pretended to misunderstand. They were a practical people there, the kind that cut the brown and hulled part of fruit, and cooked with the rest. Yeah, pretty much an Irish Chad. There was one crow who particularly disliked this change in state of affairs. A crow so old that his feathers were always ragged. He was slower than the others, but crows look after their own, and he was in good health. The old pastor who ran the church before... Huh? Oh, the old pastor who ran the church before age made him too sick to do the job anymore used to call him Hosea, after one of the messengers in the Bible, and the name stuck. Hosea was an old, stubborn bird, and despite the hostilities of the new preacher in town, maintained the cross perched atop the church as one of his preferred perches. What a confusing sentence. Father Kennings tried to hire a hunter among the churchgoers to snipe the bird off the cross. Called this behavior sacrilegious or something, but they all refused to. Old Hosea ain't done nothing, Bill refused, fuming at the local pub later that day as I was having a drink and eavesdropping. Ain't never done nothing wrong to any of us. If word got out, if ever word got back to old Father Jenkins, it'd damn near break his heart, I bet. Father Jenkins used to read scripture to that bird, for God's sakes. Amy, the bartender, chimed in. Honestly, I think this new fellow's gone too far. He's starting to really preach fire and brimstone lately, ain't he? Saying we gotta watch out, that devil's lurking in darkness and all this and that. I mean, it's true the devil never rests, but Jesus Christ, worst old Hosea's ever done is steal some corn or whatever out in the fields. And hell, you don't know that's no sin. His pappy and his grandpappy before him were taking food from the fields long before we managed them. It's his birthright as far as I'm concerned. Just leave some for the rest of us. I don't think a little corn earns old Hosea an eternal damnation or a bullet. Bill sighed and stared at the rim of his cup. Could have just called him ugly and left him at that. Bloody old man Jenkins. I blanked on the naming, okay? I'll admit it. Yeah, the previous pastor was named Old Man Jenkins. What of it? Yeah. A few days later, as I was watching the birds, I noticed old Hosea was missing, and the other crows seemed restless and distracted. Remembering the conversation I heard at the pub, I had a bad feeling in my chest. I was also particularly stuck writing a manuscript I felt wasn't going anywhere, so I took a walk around the village. Suddenly, I heard frantic calling and screaming, sounds of true terror. I rushed toward the sound, and it was coming from the edge of the nearby forested park by the local school. A noose dangled from the tree, and in the loop was old Hosea, eye sockets empty, wrapped in thorny vines and a white veil. The noose was still swinging. The longer I looked, the sicker I felt. The bird had died a painful death, tortured, and I was hanging obscenely like this. The crows took it even harder than I, screaming and scolding and milling about. Jack, who'd heard the commotion and come out, cut down the noose, looking visibly upset, moved the veiling and the vines, pricking his fingers as he did so, and gently set old Hosea down on the earth. The crows gathered in a circle on the ground and the trees, still deafeningly loud, until gradually they fell silent. They stayed there for a long time, silent, solemn, before flying off, one by one. What an evil fucking thing to do, Jack moaned, cleaning his hands and bandaging his cuts back at the classroom. What sick fuck would do something like that? I don't know, I mumbled, but the truth is I had my suspicions. There was a terrible storm rolled in that night. Lightning that blinded the eyes and thunder that made all the houses shake. Wind that screamed through the leaves and branches. Rain that streamed down like the sky was trying to power wash the sin out of mankind. It lasted all through the night and into the next day, and the mountains steamed like they were on fire. The crows stayed in the trees, although Onyx swooped down to visit me for her peanuts. I'm sorry for your loss, I muttered as she cracked open the shell with her long beak and surprisingly dexterous talons. She turned to me but didn't reply. She was a quiet bird. Suddenly, she looked left, then right, then shifted her wings on her back, as if whisking out some of the rainwater, and hopped toward me, making soft clicking sounds, like she was trying to tell me a secret. But she stopped when she heard 4 caws in the distance. She cawed back 3 times and flew off. 3 days later, the rain finally stopped. Though the ground was still wet from flooding, the sun shone brightly and the air felt fresh. Some of the locals took flooding to mean that Weave's Mist was busy working on some great magic spell. and they whispered and speculated about at the pub when twilight settled over the village. For the rest of the week, no one could account for where Father Kennings was. The other workers at the church said he must have left without telling any of them. Got a ride to the train, but they thought it was strange that his car was still in the church parking lot. And he didn't announce his errand elsewhere before leaving. People tried calling his phone for several days, but it went straight to the answering machine. The Kill Widow Police Department declared him missing when a custodian found his phone switched off on his desk. About that time, a new crow showed up, with a single purple feather on the back of his head. He seemed confused, tapping at windows and circling around the church, but going about business very surreptitiously, as though he was trying to avoid other crows. I saw him fly about the church again and again, as though he was trying to find a way in. But no one else seemed to pay him any mind, except for old lady Sharon, who taught at the school with Jack and stopped by for tea to talk botany for a bit.
I know it's probably all folklore and all, but it's no secret Father Kennings hated the crows,
she murmured, her old eyes tight with thinking through what she was saying as she spoke.
And honestly, no one ever laid a finger on the crows in a bad way until he showed up.
What is that happening? Okay, there we go.
I honestly think it was him who did old Hosea in like that. I didn't take him to be a sadistic type, and it's a distressing thought, since pastors are supposed to be empathetic and compassionate people, and I thought he was. He had good sermons and all that. A little young, but he's still settling into the role, and still responsible for so many souls and all that. But I think something about old Hosea woke the fury in him.
I don't want to say it, but I think you might be right, Jack admitted, twisting a few hairs in his mustache. Then him going missing? I ain't been a kidnapping or a murder or anything like that here in God knows how long.
I'm not thinking it was one of us,
old Sharon pressed, her voice hushing.
I think it was Weaves Mist. Heard what happened and got angry.
You think Weaves Mist went up and disappeared the pastor? Jack repeated, quietly but incredulously.
Ain't that just fairy tales? There was that mighty fearsome storm right after, though.
Are storms associated with Weaves Mist? I chimed in, holding my mug of hot tea to my chest. I've been reading up on the lore of this place, and...
Well, yeah, it is, Sharon explained. She also graced some of the plants you study with healing abilities according to them legends. Most of us folk don't believe in those stories anymore, but you gotta wonder, you know?
There has to be a more reasonable explanation to why he went missing, Jack sighed.
Cops won't be satisfied with him just getting whisked away by ghosts and fairies. Who else knows about Hosea? Sharon asked urgently. You who found him. And you, Jack, who cut him down. And me and Lisa. Did you tell anyone else?
I haven't, I volunteered. Nor have I, Jack confirmed. And even if I had, I don't know if that'd be a motive for making the pastor go poof.
I don't think he went poof, Sharon hissed, her eyes opening wide. I think he's here, among us, trying to get back into the church.
What stops him then? Hasn't he got the keys?
No. I think Weaves Mist turned him into a crow.
Now you've gone talking madness, Jack huffed. You seen a doctor for that kind of thinking? Among us, Hazer. Sharon laughed a little, her intense expression falling, the lines of her face growing less intense before rubbing her eyes.
Jack, my friend, maybe I oughta.
But I think she was on to something. I really do. Maybe it means I'm crazy too. I guess I'm crazier now. Now that I'm older and still think this may be true. 2 weeks later, autumn started feeling more like winter. Air was colder. Leaves had fallen off the trees. The bare branches had reached their winding, scraggly fingers greedily toward the watercolor skies. It was after this turn of the weather that I decided to take an evening walk one night, trying to stop working on questions in my project that held my poor overworked brain in a knotted stranglehold. As I was passing the church, something with black wings swooped by me, as though trying to get my attention. I turned, but I couldn't see it in the darkness. It swooped again and landed in front of me. It was a crow. The crow with the purple feather on his head. He flew up at me, pulled on my sweater at the collar, and urged me toward the front door of the church. I simply stared at him once he'd let go, and stopped furiously flapping his wings. "Ain't it past your bedtime?" I inquired. "Shouldn't you go find the roost?" The bird shook his head and gave me a frustrated croak, and rapped on the door of the church, then glared at me. "I don't have the keys," I replied. "What do you want to go in there for? You looking for confession?" The crow bobbed his head at the word confession, flapping somewhat melodramatically, uncrow-like. "Confession? For what? You're a crow!" Frustrated, the strange bird pulled me toward the churchyard and started hopping around, arranging sticks, forming the word help. Help with what? Why would a crow be worried about their soul? "I'm not ordained, friend. I don't think I can help you." The crow arranged the sticks into a cross. "Yes, I know you're trying to get into the church, but I can't help you with that." The crow started arranging sticks again, starting with the letter K, but a large owl hooted from the pine trees, and the bird startled and flew back toward the church, and I continued my walking home. Physically tired? Yeah, I feel that. Kennings never turned up. Missing posters everywhere. Word spread through the country trying to find him. Everyone spoke to the police as they were trying to get some leads. Any leads where to find this guy. I only answered their questions. I wasn't going to tell them that he was magicked away. I didn't all the way believe it myself. Oh, I think I skipped a sentence. Kennings never turned up. Missing posters everywhere. Word spread through the county trying to find him. Everyone spoke to the police as they were trying to get some leads. Any leads where to find this guy. I only answered their questions. I wasn't going to tell them that he was magicked away. I didn't all the way believe that myself. 3 days later, the weird crow again harassed me, leading me to the graveyard, and frantically pointing at letters K, E, N, and again on a different headstone, I, and again, and then G, and then S, dragging me from headstone to headstone, wrapping them letters like a woodpecker until the bird could barely fly straight. "Kennings?" I repeated, and the bird all but flopped over in relief. "He's not in the church right now, friend. No one knows where he is." The bird gave me the most exasperated, vitriolic look he could muster with the range of expression afforded by the body of a crow. He pecked me angrily, preened himself, and stared at me. But all I could do was stare and eventually walk away. Only a few hours later did it occur to me that perhaps he was trying to say that he was Kennings, not looking for him. Again, who would take that seriously? Then came the fateful day. The reckoning. The weird crow was finally spotted by Dustyback, who scolded him furiously. Soon a whole cloud of black birds chased the strange spellin' bee winning crow off the roof of the church and into the cornfield. Followed along in my car and picked up Jack, 'cause it was a Saturday in hell. We didn't want to miss this. The ideas from Sharon had been spinning in both our minds, whether we wanted to believe it or not, much less whether we wanted to admit it. Crows kept Kenning surrounded, forcing him to land, and then formed the same crow court circle around him, fixing him with their bright, furious glares. The air was thick as the silence settled. I don't know what Kennings preached that day, be it of hell and the devil, of fire and brimstone, of the salvation of Jesus or God's forgiveness and mercy. I don't know if he confessed his sins before God or insulted the whole jury in righteous tones or begged for compassion and declared his atonement. Whatever he spoke in caws and rattles and gurgles and clicks and clucks and whines, the crows listened intently. Finally, after what felt like hours, the preacher ran out of things to say. There was a pause, and then there was a chorus of raucous squawks and caws, and the closest a crow can get to a roar. The circle converged on him, tearing feather from flesh, flesh from bone, brutalizing him, until when they flew away, there was nothing left but a mangled corpse of crow, his talons helplessly clutching a silver cross. They never found Kennings, the police, I mean. Jack and I swore over stiff drink that we were going to keep quiet about this whole affair, try to pretend like none of this ever happened. Jack probably took it to the grave, maybe told Lisa. If he's still alive, he's got to be close to 90. As for me, well, here I am, telling you this. Write me off as crazy old man, it's okay. Just don't throw any stones at birds, even if it's just to make me feel more at ease. And that's it. That is the story. Hopefully it was good. I haven't tried writing something like that in a very long time. So hopefully it was okay and not too boring. You liked it? Thanks, Kenny. I've been wanting to write a horror story about crows for years. I'd never just sat down and done it. You liked it? Thanks, sir. Very well written, also crows. Very goog. Good. I might write more of these if you like them. Yeah, but I've been trying to write that for years, and I just couldn't get the flavor down. But I think I got it this time. Goog. Goog. Yeah, that's all I wrote, though. Fucking hate my brain. It's okay, me too. I hate my brain as well. The more you know about my brain, the more you understand why I hate it. Yeah, sorry for any little throat noises I make. I swallowed my meds wrong. Again. I'm really stupid. So, for some reason, if I don't swallow them with enough water, I get, like, burny sensation in my chest, which I think is heartburn, which makes no sense, but whatever. Alright, so we want to hear Edgar Allan Poe about demons, about Texas, about Victorian age, about cops, Ireland, or China. Just shout something out, chat. I have all these pulled up because I knew I wasn't going to be talking crows. Poe? Yeah, I got some Poe. Ireland? Not cops. Okay, cool. Alright, we'll do Poe first, and then we'll do murder fairies. Okay, sir? Alright. I'll do poetry from Poe.
Murderer!
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is the best time to read The Raven, right? Right, chat? I feel like that's pretty on the nose. Hold on. I think I have something for this. There's no way I don't have a crow background. There we go. Poetry. Alright, that doesn't look like garbage. Quoth the raven, eat my shorts. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I murmured, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ha! Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and in each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly had I sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," I said, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat it is, and the mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with minor lord of lady, perched above my chamber door, perched on a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven,
Nevermore.
much I marvelled at this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though it answered little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the raven said,
Nevermore.
startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what uttered it is only stock and store, caught by some unhappy master, whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, with this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore, meant in croaking, nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall pass, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy Goth has lent thee, by the angels he has sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven,
Nevermore.
Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or divil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted on this desert island enchanted. Desert land, and I knew I'm desolate, yet all undaunted on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted. Tell me, truly I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven,
Nevermore.
Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whose angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, who the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven,
Nevermore.
Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form off my door. Quoth the raven,
Nevermore.
and the raven, never flitting, is still sitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, but the lamplight o'er him streaming throws the shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. God, I love that poem. It's so fun. It's such a fun poem to read. Maybe I get too into it. Alright. Let's go see some murder fairies. One of my favorites. God, I love it. I'm a sucker for poetry about birds. If y'all find any, send it my way. I'll read it on stream. I don't give a shit. Alright. Hold on. I'm finding murder fairies. Okay, here we go. This is called the Fairy Shilling from County Donegal. And Caney, I apologize in advance. My pronunciation of shit is not good. I do not speak Gaelic. I am not Irish. I just like their stuff. Let's see. We can go... Let's go back here. That's where you're from, and it's like... Donegal? Donegal? Excuse me. What? Why are you like this? Stop! No one asked you. Not you, Caney. Donegal. Donegal? Where's the accent? I'm sorry. Donegal. I imagine it's at the beginning. And not like Donegal. 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 Hey, Donegal. Okay, got it. Haha! Thank you, Caney. I hope your ears don't bleed from this. It was usually highly inadvisable for humans to have anything to do with the fairies, or interact with them in any way, no matter how innocently. At best, fairies were to be regarded as tricky, unreliable creatures. At worst, as the agents of the devil, always eager to entrap human souls at the behest of the infernal master. 'Twas well to avoid them, or, if this proved impossible, to ignore all of their advances. Fairies, as it was believed, were always trying to ensnare humans to their own will, and the slightest acknowledgement of them would enable them to do this. Consequently, one must never speak to a fairy, answer a direct question from one, or show them any kindness. An old tale from County... Oh boy. Armagh? 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 Arma? Maybe one of those? tells of a young man who was spirited away inside a fairy hill after giving one a light first pipe. He was never seen again, and his disappearance was connected directly to his kindly action. George Barnett, the celebrated story of, like, Arma. Arma? Or just Arma? I don't think they trill the R over there. So Arma. Like the game Arma. Oh, okay. Gotcha. George Barnett, the celebrated storyteller of County Tyrone. Tyrone? Tyrone? Tyranny? I don't know. Told a story that he'd heard from his mother concerning two sisters who lived in Levy? LeVay? Tyrone, like the name? Okay, Tyrone. LeVay, South Derry. Lavy? Levy? I'm honestly not sure. I don't think it's pronounced LeVay, like the Satanist. That'd be interesting. Anyway. On their way to bring cattle. That one I have no idea because I don't go to the north that much. Very fair. On their way to bring cattle from a wood near their home, they had to cross a field, which was considered to be badly fairy haunted. The elder sister drew slightly ahead, as the other one strove to catch up with her. The elder sister drew slightly ahead, and as the younger sister strove to catch up with her, a fairy stepped out from behind a bush and asked, "Would you like a tune on the fiddle?" Knowing that fairies were trying to draw her into their power, the girl walked on without answering. A little further along, another fairy stepped out from behind a tree and asked, "Would you like a tune on the fife?" Although her heart was stopping within her, the girl kept on without answering, and a little further along, a third fairy stepped out from behind a big standing stone and asked, "Would you like a tune on the bodhran?" Bodhran? 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 I can't imagine I'm pronouncing that wrong. Bodhran? Bodhran? I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know what it is. Bodhran is a frame drum of Irish origin. Okay. How the bloody hell do you how do you pronounce it? Like Bodhran. Oh wow, the only thing I didn't try. Bodhran. Oh well, now that you say it, it sounds obvious. Bodhran. Thank you, Kanie. Whereupon she fainted, and her sister had to come back and carry her home. According to George Barnett, she never enjoyed good health afterwards and later left the country to go to America. Oh, you poor thing. Why'd you come here? Oi. If one should avoid speaking to fairies, then to accept money from them was extremely unwise, since to do so could damn one's immortal soul. In any case, fairy money usually turned into leaves or cow dung as soon as the fairy departed, or when it was exposed to direct sunlight. The godly therefore tended to shun the fairies and their riches for more wholesome pleasures. But some did not, and some received fairy money inadvertently. This story comes from the Malin? This story comes from the Malin area of Donegal. Donegal. There we go, we got it. Donegal. Right up on the very north coast of the country, and a number of variations of it exist. The following version was told by Cathal Boyle, an elderly storyteller from the region. Just beyond the Malin crossroads up to the glen, there was a man living one time, and his name was Paddy O'Gadra. That one you don't know, that's okay. I'll make it up and make it sound confident. He was a decent, honest man, and well known in the countryside for his goodness to his neighbours. Paddy had never married and lived alone in a tidy little cottage, well up in the glen, where he farmed a bit of land. One evening he had some business in Mallinmore and was coming home by way of the crossroads. 'Twas late in the evening, and the day was darkening down. A few stars were out. The fat moon was nipping out in between the clouds. Paddy quickened his step, as he wanted to pass the cross before nightfall. Crossroads were dangerous places after nightfall, and ghosts and fairies sometimes hung about them. Paddy the man himself, yeah? Dangerous places after nightfall, for ghosts and fairies sometimes hung about them, waiting to prey on lonely travellers. As he approached the Malin Cross, his heart nearly failed him. There was someone or something there. A shadow moved in the gloom just where the roads crossed, and he drew nearer. Paddy saw that it was a small woman in dark clothes, her head wrapped up in a shawl. She was sitting by the very edge of the road, and close beside her was a large wicker basket. As he drew level with her, Paddy wished her a good night and made to go on, but at the sound of his voice, she lifted her basket and fell into step beside him, walking into Malin Glen. As they walked, Paddy, being a civil man, tried to make conversation with the strange companion, but she never answered him in a word. She noticed that the basket she was carrying appeared to be very heavy, and she was struggling as she walked. "Give me your basket," he said, "and I'll carry it a piece for you." So she gave him the basket, and to his surprise, he found that it was light as a feather, and he could carry it quite easily. They walked on in silence, with the moon now coming out behind the clouds and flooding the countryside with pale light. Now that she'd got rid of her basket, the woman stepped out fairly quickly, and Paddy almost had to run to keep up with her. At length they came to the end of the lane, which ran up into the glen past Paddy's house. He turned to the woman, meaning to hand her back her basket. "I'll have to leave you here," he said, "for I'm going up onto the Malin Glen. I'll give you back your basket." The woman, however, never slowed her step, but spoke to him for the first time. "Hold on to it," she answered, "for I'm going up to the glen myself. I'm lodging with Jimmy Jack, who lives up there. I have business in these parts, and Jimmy Jack has agreed to give me the bed for the night." Now, this astonished Paddy. Jimmy Jack was his neighbour, and lived a little way above him, at the very head of the glen. The two men were good friends, and Jimmy Jack had never mentioned that he'd had anyone come in to stay with him, least of all a woman. All the same, Paddy carried the women's basket further into the Malin Glen. Soon they reached Paddy's own gateway, and this is where he set the basket down. "I'll have to leave you here," he said, "for this is my home." She reached into the pocket of her apron. "Are you a drinking man?" she asked him. "Well," said Paddy, "when I'm in a pub or a shebeen." "Shebeen? Shebeen? Shib... What is this word? Sheben? Sheben? Spell it. It's like shebin. Like that. Yeah, it's okay. uh, it's also spelt like this. Maybe that'll help. It's an illicit bar or club where an excisable alcoholic beverage was sold without a license. No clue. I can't. Shebeen. I'm seeing. I was thinking like, if it's a drink, I have no idea. It's like a bar. I have no idea how to say that word. From Anglo-Irish Sivan. From Sebe. Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard that word. Sivan. Pronunciation. Here we go. Shebeen. Hold on. Okay, so apparently it is Shebeen. What's the British pronunciation? Oh, same. Okay. Shebeen, I guess. Cool, thanks, Google. Well, said Patty. Well, when the English.exe has stopped working and needs to close. Okay. Well, said Patty, when I'm in a pub or a shebeen, I can take a pint of a stout or a sup of whiskey as well as the next man. The woman reached him an old shilling, which somehow still sparkled in the moonlight. This is for your trouble, she said. When you're in a pub, have a drink and think of me. And with that, she lifted her basket and walked on to the Malin Glen toward Jimmy Jack's house. For a long time, Paddy stood there looking at the old coin in the palm of his hand. He'd never seen a shilling like it. It was certainly very old, for it was worn round the edges. Yet there seemed to be an inscription, oh no, there, yet he couldn't read it, because of how badly worn away it was with use. And yet, it seemed to glow, with some sort of inner brilliance that reflected the moonlight around it. At last he slid the coin into his pocket and went indoors. That night Paddy couldn't sleep, nor could he even settle in bed. A strange woman kept invading his thoughts. Who was she? What was her business in the Malin Glen, and why hadn't Jimmy Jack mentioned her to him? It was all very mysterious. Lying in his bed, he made up his mind to go and see his neighbour the following morning and ask him about the curious guest. Jimmy Jack was out sweeping his yard the next morning when Paddy came up to see him. He asked Jimmy straight away about his visitor the night before. Damn your eyes, said Jimmy Jack. There's no woman here, and no woman called up upon with me last night. I was in the house on my own until I went to bed. Jimmy Jack, some name. It's Jimmy Jack. Not G. J-E-C-K, but it's so close to Jimmy Jack that it's laughable. The two men looked at each other. It was growing stranger by the minute, and it was to become stranger yet. Paddy was worried the woman he had helped with her basket might be a fairy. The thought frightened him. It is close enough. The thought frightened him a little, but he had to put it at the back of his mind and try to get on with everyday life. He had a message to do with the post office in Mallinmore, and when he was there, he bought a twist of tobacco for his pipe. As he paid for it over the counter, he reached into his pocket and brought out the old shilling, and the strange woman had given him. He used this to pay for the tobacco, receiving a handful of change in turn. On the way home, however, he had the occasion to put his hand into his pocket again to count his change. To his astonishment, there in the middle of it was the old shilling with the odd worn writing around the edges that he couldn't read. The late afternoon sun caught it, making it glow with an eerie light. It was the same coin he used at the post office. Of that he was sure. It had somehow returned to him. It was a magic coin. Maybe something to do with the fairies. And that was the way of it. Every time Paddy was in a shop or a pub or a shebeen, he used the old coin, it would return magically to his pocket. He would bring the change of it with it. Soon Paddy's pockets were jingling, but the thought of it gave him no peace. Paddy O'Gadra was a religious man who never missed Mass of a Sunday, and the thought of having some fairy thing about him unsettled him. At times, he thought of putting the old coin in the church poor box, but he somehow couldn't bring himself to do it. Who knows what might happen, he told himself. And anyway, he never wanted for anything as long as he had the fairy shilling about him. It was a tempting thing. He thought about using it to wager or buy grand things that he wouldn't normally afford. He knew the coin was exerting some kind of spell over him, luring him away from righteousness. He'd been a simple man before now, but now he had grand ideas, and it was all the work of the fairies. In the end, his conscience got the better of him. It was certainly a fairy thing, and he had simply put it his way to lead him to the paths of wickedness and to damn his own soul. He decided to take it to the priest in Malinmore and tell him the tale. When he heard it, the priest took the story extremely seriously. "Let me see the coin," he said, and Paddy brought it out and laid it on the priest's hand. At once the holy man dropped it as though it was a hot coal fresh from the fire. It lay on the table between the two of them. Paddy gazed at the other for as long as he could handle the old coin with no hurt. But obviously the priest, being a holy man, could not. "This is without a doubt a fairy thing," said the priest solemnly, "and something that has been forged in the fires of hell to waylay the godly must be exorcised." And he went to his robing room and put out his religious vestments and stole, and came back with a Bible. Opening the holy word, he instructed Paddy to lay the coin on its pages. Then he said a few words in Latin, made the sign of the cross over it, and the coin faded away like a drop of rainwater, as though it never existed at all. Paddy O'Gadra had a lucky escape, sure enough, but who knows the depths of wickedness the old coin might have led him to. The priest instructed him to attend Mass every day for a month to ensure that there was no fairy taint about him, and he was glad to do so. And at night, when he walked up from Malinmore, he always felt a bit of a chill as he approached the Malin Cross, for perhaps the fairy woman might be waiting there. But if she was, he never saw her again. But he'd had a very lucky escape, all right. Let's see if I can find another murder fairy. Now these look like strictly ghost stories. I'm still looking around. Hold on. I have an insane amount of books on this computer. Ugh. Oh, let's have a gander at this. Holy crap, this book is a mess. Irish Fairy and Folk Tales. Let's try this. This looks like less of a mess. try this one as well. Alright. You want to hear more about Patty? Let's do Patty Corcoran's Wife by William Carleton. Patty Corcoran's wife was for several years afflicted with a kind of complaint which nobody could properly understand. She was sick, and she was not sick. Actually, let me change the background. Let's see if we can get something greener. I don't know why this is here. How's this? That works. She was sick and she was not sick. Patty's back again. We can never get rid of him. She was well and she was not well. She was as ladies wish to be who love their lords. And she was not as ladies wish to be. In fact, nobody could tell what the matter with her was. She had a gnawing at the heart which came heavily upon her husband, for with the help of God, a keener appetite than the same gnawing amounted. A keener appetite than the same gnawing amounted to could not be met with a summer's day. Poor woman was delicate beyond belief, and had no appetite at all. So she hadn't, barring a little relish for mutton chop, or a steak, or a bit of meat. Anyway, for sure, God help her, she hadn't the least inclination for the... Oh my God. Ooh, time to sound these words out. She hadn't the least inclination for the dry pratey? Dry... What the flying fuck are those words? Nobody knows. The fuck is that? I'm looking it up. Oh, it's a potato. Apparently. She hadn't the least inclination for the dry potato, or the drop of sour buttermilk along with it. And especially she was so poorly, and indeed for a woman in her condition. Google saves the day part 2, oh yeah. And indeed for a woman in her condition, for sick as she was, poor Patty was always made to believe her in that condition, but God's will be done, she didn't care. A pratey and a grain of salt was a welcome to her. Glory be to his name, and the best roast and boiled that ever was dressed, and why not? There was one comfort, she wouldn't be long with him, long troubling him. It mattered little what she got, but sure she knew herself, that from the gnawing at her heart, she could never do without a little bit of mate now and then. And sure, if her own husband bedridged it to her, who else had she better right to expect it from? Some of these words have written in the accent into the words. It says buttermilk. Well, as we have said, she lay a bedridden invalid. Whoops. She lay a bedridden invalid for long enough, trying doctors and quacks of all sorts, sexes and sizes, and all without a farthing's benefit, until at the long run poor Patty was nearly brought to the last pass in striving to keep her in a bit of mate. The 7th year was now on to the point of closing, when on one harvest day she lay bemoaning her hard condition, on her bed beyond the kitchen fire. A little weeshy woman, dressed in a neat red cloak, comes in, and sitting down by the hearth says, Christ, it must be difficult if you don't understand Irish accents. I understand a bit. Like, I can kind of infer what noise they're trying to make. But I'm no native speaker, dog. And I think I'm getting through it without sounding awful. So hopefully I'm not doing terribly. Neat Red Cloak comes in and sitting down by the hearth says, "Well, Kitty Corcoran, you've had a long hair of it there and on the broad of your back for 7 years. And you're just as far as from being cured as ever." "Mavronay," said the other. "In troth, that's what I'm..." Whoa, gotta slow that down. "Mavronay," said the other. "In troth, that's what I was this minute thinking of." Well, that's not too bad. My brain is just not used to seeing English that way. "In troth, that's what I was this minute thinking of. And a sorrowful thought that is to me." "It's your own fault, then," says the little woman. "And indeed, for that matter, it's your fault that you ever were there at all." "Arrah, how's that?" asked Kitty. "Sure, I wouldn't be here if I could help it. Do you think it's a comfort or a pleasure for me to be sick and bedridden?" "It's about 50-50, not terrible, fair." Very fair. "No," said the other. I know, like, I'm drifting into Russian in places because I'm also half used to Russian, and it's just... I'm surprised it's not a complete fucking mess. "No," said the other. "I do not. But I'll tell you for the truth. For the last 7 years, you've been annoying us. I'm one of the good people. And, as I have a regard to you, I come to let you know that the reason you've been sick for so long as you are, for all the time you've been ill, if you take the trouble to remember, you're... Oh my dear God. For all the time you've been ill, if you take the trouble to remember, your children thrown out your dirty water." Holy dear God. Oh, I gotta sound this out. Came to lurk while I tried to sleep off this fever. I hope you feel better, Mia. Oh my God. Alright. So, I'm going to cut and paste this sentence into chat so that you understand what I'm trying to read. For all the time you've been ill, if you'll take the trouble to remember, your children threw out your dirty water after dusk and before sunrise, at the very time we were passing your door, which we pass twice a day. Now, if you avoid this, if you throw it out in a different place, and at a different time, the complaint you have will leave you, and so will gnawing at your heart, and you'll be as well as you ever were. If you don't follow this advice, why, remain as you are, and all the art of man can't cure you." She then bade her goodbye, and disappeared. Kitty, who was glad to be cured on such easy terms, immediately complied with the injunction of the fairy, and the consequence was that, the next day, she found herself in as good as health as ever enjoyed during her life. And that's... The only thing that fairy murdered was my pronunciation of the English fucking language. I'm having fun with these. We'll do one more. We'll do The Fairy Nurse. Oh Lord. It's a poem. Never mind. We will not do that, because I saw a whole bunch of words I already can't pronounce. And how weird some Irish accents are. Oh yeah, they're... Like, I was learning about this recently. Apparently, like, different parts of Ireland have completely different accents with their own, like, turns and twists and cadences. Like, there are some that sound almost kind of English, and then there's some that are, like, where I have to slow down the tape to understand what they're saying. Because I, like, don't understand it. Alright. This is... Good fucking lord. I can't even pronounce the title. Help me out. My guess is Tag O'Kane or Tag O'Cathan? Caton? Caton? And the corpse. And I'll read the editor's note. I found it hard to place Mr. Douglas Hyde's magnificent story among the ghosts or the fairies. It is among the fairies on the grounds that all these ghosts and bodies were in no manner ghosts and bodies, but pishoguas, fairy spells. One often hears of these visions in Ireland. Tag is a bit of a risky word to use around Catholics. Oh no! Oh no! I'm sorry, chat. Apparently it means dough? Oh, from German. What's it mean from Irish? Tag. Thanks. Meaning. A mass of flour moistened, kneaded, but not baked. Females. Apparently it means dough, like bread dough. In German. Not to me, though, because it's an insult the English would use toward Irish people as an insult toward their religion, essentially. Oh. But this is translated from Irish. My god, night. Alright, well, I'm sorry to anyone who's Catholic and or Irish and or doesn't like dough. Okay, one often hears these visions in Ireland. I've met a man who's lived a wild life, like the man in the story, till a vision came over him in county. Something else in Irish, but I'm barely passing Irish, that's fine. I'm definitely not passing Irish, so I don't know. Changes all character. He will not go out at night. If you speak to him, he suddenly trembles. Okay. Oh, dear God. Oh, God, this is half in Gaelic. Oh, no. Oh, dear. I will do my best. There was once a grown-up lad in the country... Oh, boy. Leitrim? Wouldn't recommend if you do come to Ireland, because barely anyone actually speaks fluent Irish. That makes sense. Leitrim? Leitrim? Leitrim. Probably. Leitrim. 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 Oh. You see, when you say it, it suddenly makes sense. Leitrim. Oh. God, you make it seem so obvious. And, like, here I am, like, sounding it out. There was once a grown-up lad in the country Leitrim. He was strong and lively, and the son of a rich farmer. His father had plenty of money, and he did not spare it on his son. Accordingly, when the boy grew up, he liked sport better than work, and as his father had no other children, he loved this one so much that he allowed him to do in everything just as it pleased himself. Gotta put it in the pronunciation words. Yep. You really do. Half this book should be in the pronunciation words. He was very extravagant, and he used to scatter gold money, as another person would scatter the white. He was seldom to be found at home, but if there was a fair or a race or gathering within 10 miles of him, you're dead certain to find him there. And he seldom spent a night at his father's house, but he used to always go out rambling, and, like Sean Bui long ago, there was Grad Gach Kylan im Rebal im oh Lord. Grad Gach Kylan im Brolach Lean. Maybe I got 20% of that right. Spell it! Oh boy. There. That's what I tried to say. The love of every girl in the breast of a shirt. Jesus Christ. Yeah. I tried. Oh my god, it doesn't even end there. Grad Gach Kylan. Colin? I used to know how to say that word. It means girl. Grad Gach Kylan I Bralach Elena. Lena? Oh god. The love of every girl in the breast of his shirt, and it's many's the kisses he got and he gave, for he was very handsome, and there wasn't a girl in the country but would fall in love with him, only for him to fasten his 2 eyes on her, and it was for that someone made this ran on him. Kalina? Kalina? Kalina. Is sort of how you pronounce it. Oh Lord. I need to brush up on my Gaelic. I used to kinda know it better. I was never good at it. I love how it sounds, but I can't speak it for shit. Colin, sort of. Okay. Well, it might be better to start with the languages I do know. I'm okay in Russian. I'm pretty alright in Chinese. I can figure out German to some degree. I was raised on some Yiddish. I used to know Hebrew. I don't know it anymore. And I'm very bad at Japanese. Irish isn't my best, so you're gonna get piss poor translation. That is totally fine. Apparently this book translates it. I might skip the Gaelish bit and go to the English, because I'm just gonna humiliate myself if I try to do this. Look at the rogue, it's for kisses he's rambling. It isn't much wonder, for that was his way. He's like an old hedgehog. At night he'll be scrambling from this place to that, but he'll sleep in the day. So this is the origin of Sonic the Hedgehog's just running from house to house in the night to get laid. Tried learning Japanese, but I gave up because it was way too fucking hard. The grammar is just brutal. At last he became very wild and unruly. He wasn't to be seen day nor night in his father's house, but always rambling or going on his Kylie night visit from one place to place or house to house, so that the old people used to shake their heads and say to one another, "It's easy seeing what will happen to the land when an old man dies. His son will run it through in a year. Won't stand him that long himself." Old hedgehog, that's a rare insult. It's such an adorable insult, though. Hedgehogs are so cute. He used to always be gambling and card playing and drinking, but his father never minded his bad habits and never punished him. But it happened one day that the old man was told that his son had ruined the character of a girl in the neighborhood, and he was greatly angry. And he called his son to him and said to him quietly, sensibly, "Avit," said he, "you know I loved you greatly up to this, and I never stopped you from doing your choice thing, whatever it was. I kept plenty of money with you, and I always hoped to leave you the house and the land, and all I had after myself would be gone. But I heard a story of you today that has disgusted me with you. I cannot tell you the grief that I felt when I heard such a thing of you. And I tell you now, plainly, that unless you marry that girl, I'll leave the house and the land and everything to my brother's son. And could never leave it to anyone who would make so bad a use of it as you do yourself, deceiving women and coaxing girls. Settle with yourself now, whether you'll marry that girl and get my land as a fortune with her, or refuse to marry her and give up all that was coming to you. Tell me in the morning which of the two things you'll have chosen." I was expecting the mother to be whacking him with the wooden spoon. Yeah. That's the kind of insult it is, huh? Oh, Domnu Sheriff. I have no idea if I said that right. "Father, you wouldn't say that to me. And I, such a good son as I am. Who told you I wouldn't marry the girl?" says he. But his father was gone, and the lad knew well enough that he would keep his word too, for he was greatly troubled in his mind. For as quiet and kind as the father was, he never went back of a word that he had once said. There wasn't another man in the country who was harder to bend than he was. The boy did not know rightly what to do. He was in love with the girl indeed, and he hoped to marry her some time or other. But he would much sooner have remained another while he was, and following his old tricks, drinking, sporting, playing cards, and along with that, he was angry that his father should order him to marry, and should threaten him if he didn't do it. I only know one Irish insult, and that's pogmathoin. Pogmathoin? Is that old hedgehog? "Isn't my father a great fool?" says he to himself. "I was ready enough, and only too anxious to marry Mary. And now he's threatened me. Faith, I've got a great mind to let it go another while." His mind was so much excited that he remained between two notions as to what he should do. He walked out into the night, at last to cool his heated blood. Went on the road. He lit a pipe, and as the night was fine, he walked and walked on, until the pace made him begin to forget his trouble. The night was bright, and the moon was half full. Said like Poag Mohon. Poag Mohan. Poag Mohan. God, I sound like an idiot American, don't I? What's it mean? Pogue. Like road, but Pogue. Pogue Mohon. kiss my ass. Well done. Ah, that's good. I appreciate that. Ugh. Where am I? He walked out into the night to cool his heated blood and went out onto the road. He lit a pipe, and as the night was fine, he walked and walked on, until the quick pace had made him forget his trouble. The night was bright, and the moon half full. There was not a breath of wind blowing, and the air was calm and mild. He walked on for nearly 3 hours, and suddenly he remembered that it was late at night, and time for him to turn. Musha. M-U-S-H-A. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, except for Musha or Musha. Or Musha. Not sure. I think I forgot myself, says he. It must be near 12 o'clock now. The word was hardly out of his mouth when he heard the sound of many voices, and the trampling of feet on the road before him. I don't know who could be out so late at night as this. I'm on such a lonely road, said he to himself. He stood listening, and as he heard the voices of many people talking through the other, he could not understand what they were saying. Oh, Wura, says he. I'm afraid it's not Irish or English they have. Can't be that they're Frenchmen. He went on a couple of yards further, and he saw well enough by the light of the moon a band of little people coming toward him. They were carrying something big and heavy with them. Oh, murder, he says to himself. Surely it can't be that they're the good people that's in it. Every rib of hair that was on his head stood up, and there fell a shaking of his bones, for he saw that they were coming to him fast. He looked at them again and perceived that there was about 20 little men in it. There was not a man at all of them higher than about 3 feet, or 3 feet and a half, and some of them were grey and seemed very old. He looked again, and he could not make out what the heavy thing they were carrying was, till they came up to him. They all stood round about him. They threw the heavy thing down on the road, and he saw on the spot that it was a dead body. He became as cold as the death. There was not a drop of blood running in his veins, and the old little grey manion came up to him and said, Isn't it lucky we met you, Taig O'Kane? Poor Taig could not bring out a word at all, nor open his lips, if you were to get the world for it, and so he gave no answer. Taig O'Kane, said the little grey man again. Isn't it timely you met us? Taig could not answer him. Taig O'Kane, says he, the 3rd time. Isn't it lucky and timely we met you? But Taig remained silent, and he was afraid to return an answer, and his tongue was as if it was tied to the roof of his mouth. The little grey man turned to his companions, and there was joy in his bright little eye. And now, says he, Taig O'Kane hasn't a word. We can do with him what we please. Taig, says he, you're living a bad life, and we can make a slave of you now. You cannot withstand us. There's no use in trying to go against us. Lift that corpse. Taig was so afraid that he was only able to utter the 2 words, I won't. First frightened as he was obstinate and stiff, same as ever. Taig O'Kane won't lift the corpse, said the little man in wicked little laugh, for all the world like breaking of the lock, the dry kippeens. I don't know what these words are, but I'm trying my best. And with a harsh little voice, like the striking of a cracked bell, Taig O'Kane won't lift the corpse. Make him lift it. And before the word was out of his mouth, they had gathered around poor Taig, they all talking and laughing through the other. Taig tried to run from them, but they followed him, and a man of them stretched out his foot before him as he ran, so that Taig was thrown into a heap on the road. And before he could rise up, the fairies caught him, some by the hands and some by the feet, and they held him tight, in a way that he could not stir. with his face against the ground. 6 or 7 of them raised the body then, and pulled it over to him, and let it down on his back. The breast of the corpse was squeezed against Teig's back and shoulders, and the arms of the corpse were thrown about Teig's neck. Then they stood back from him a couple of yards, and let him get up. He rose, foaming at the mouth and cursing, and he shook himself, thinking to throw the corpse off his back. But his fear and his wonder were great when he found that the 2 arms had a tight hold round his own neck, that the 2 legs were squeezing his hips firmly, and that how strongly he tried, he could not throw it off. Oh yeah, love every girl in the Chester for sure. Yeah, that's what it said it was. That adds up, Kenny. Basically, he was a hoe. Piggyback ride, pretty much. He could not throw it off any more than a horse can throw off his saddle. He was terribly frightened then. He thought he was lost. Oh, forever, he said to himself. It's the bad life I'm leading that has given the good people this power over me. I promised to God and Mary, Peter and Paul, Patrick and Bridget. Oh, hey, there's old Patty again. But I'll mend my ways for as long as I have to live. If I have to come clear out of this danger, I'll marry the girl. The little grey man came up to him again and said to him, Now, Tegan, says he, you didn't lift the body when I told you to lift it. And now, see how you were made to lift it. Perhaps when I tell you to bury it, you won't bury it until you're made to bury it. Good old Patty Sumbuck, right? Anything at all that I can do for your honour, said Teig. I'll do it. For he was getting the sense already. As if it had not been for the greatest fear that was upon him, he never would have let that civil word slip out of his mouth. The little man laughed a sort of laugh again. You're getting quiet now, Teig, says he. I'll bail you. I'll go bail. But you'll be quiet enough before I'm done with you. Listen to me now, Teig O'Kane. If you don't obey me and all I'm telling you to do, you'll repent it. You must carry with you that corpse on your back to Temple Demas. Lord knows if I've said that right. And you must bring it into the church with you, and make a grave for it in the very middle of the church. And you must raise up the flags and put them down again in the very same way. You must carry the clay out of the church and leave the place as it was when he came, so that no one could know there had been anything changed. No, but that's not all. Maybe that the body won't be allowed to be buried in that church. Perhaps some other man has the bed, and if so, it's likely he won't share it with this one. If you don't get leave to bury it in Temple Demas, you must carry it to Carrick Fad of Vicarus. Oh Lord, I'm pretty sure I said that wrong. Carrick Fad Vicarus. And bury it in the churchyard there. And if you don't get it into that place, take it with you to Temple Ronan. And if that churchyard's closed on you, take it to Imlog Fada. And if you're not able to bury it there, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of laundry lists of... You guys were shopping for cemeteries or something? And if you're not able to bury it there, you've no more to do than take it to Kilbreda. And you can bury it there without hindrance. I cannot tell you which one of those churches is the one, but you'll have to leave buried that corpse under the clay. But I know it will be allowed you to bury it at some church or other of them. If you do this work rightly, we'll be thankful to you, and you'll have no curse to grieve. But if you're slow or lazy, believe me, we shall take satisfaction of you. If any Irish words have b at the end of it, it's pronounced like v for some stupid reason. I kind of get that, but I wouldn't have guessed it. Carrick Vad Vicoris. Fada. Okay. When the little grey man had done speaking, his comrades laughed and clapped their hands together. Glick, glick, whee, whee, they cried. Go on, you have 8 hours before ye till daybreak. If you haven't had this man buried before the sun rises, you're lost. They struck a fist and foot behind him and drove him onto the road. He was obliged to walk and to walk fast, for they gave him no rest. He thought himself that there was not a wet path or a dirty boreen or a crooked contrary road in the whole country that he had not walked that night. The night at some times was very dark. When there would come a cloud across the moon, he could see nothing, and he used often to fall. Sometimes he was hurt, sometimes he escaped. He was obliged always to rise on the moment and hurry on. Sometimes the moon would break out clearly. He would look behind him and see the little people following at his back, and he heard them speaking among themselves, talking and crying out, screaming like a flock of seagulls. And if he was to save his soul, he never understood as much as one word of what they were saying. He did not know how far he walked. And the last one of them cried out to him, "Stop here!" He stood. They all gathered round him. "Do you not see those withered trees over there?" says the old boy to him again. "Temple Demas is among those trees, and you must go in there by yourself, for we cannot follow you or go with you. You must remain here. Go on boldly." I'm going to pass out, so you're the last one. Complete the mission. You got it, Caney. You take care. You sleep well, you hear? Thank you for your help. Teig looked from him and saw a high wall that was in places half broken down, like an old grey church. You're also still working, not a problem. I will finish the murder fairies for you, Zerb. Teig looked from him, and he saw a high wall that was in places half broken down, an old grey church on the inside of the wall, about a dozen withered old trees scattered here and there around it. There was neither leaf nor twig on any of them, but their bare, crooked branches were stretched out like the arms of an angry man when he threatens. He had no help for it. He was obliged to go forward. Murder fairies! He was a couple 100 yards from the church, but he walked on and never looked behind him, till he came to a gate of the churchyard. The old gate was thrown down, and he had no difficulty in entering. He turned then to see if any of the little people were following him. But there came a cloud over the moon, and the night became so dark that he could see nothing. He went into the churchyard and walked up the old grassy pathway leading to the church. When he reached the door, he found it locked. The door was large and strong, and he did not know what to do. At last he threw out his knife with difficulty and stuck it into the wood to try if it were not rotten, but it was not. "Now," he said to himself, "no more to do. The door is shut, and I can't open it." Before the words were rightly shaped in his mind, a voice in his ear said to him, "Search for the key on top of the door, or on the wall." He started. "Who's that speaking to me?" he cried, turning round, but he saw no one. The voice said into his ear again, "Search for the key on top of the door, or on the wall." "What's that?" he said, sweat running from his forehead. "Who spoke to me?" "It's I, the corpse that spoke to you," said the voice. "Can you talk?" "Now and again," said the corpse. Teig searched for the key, and he found it on top of the wall. He was much too frightened to say any more, but he opened the door wide, and as quickly as he could, he went in with the corpse on his back. It was dark as pitch inside, and poor Teig began to shake and tremble. "Light the candle," said the corpse. Teig put his hand in his pocket, as well as he was able, and drew out a flint and steel. He struck the spark out of it, and lit a burnt rag he had in his pocket. It blew until it made a flame. Looked around him. The church was very ancient, and part of the wall was broken down. The windows were blown in or cracked, and the timber of the seats were rotten. There were 6 or 7 old iron candlesticks there still. In one of the candlesticks, Teig found the stump of an old candle, and he lit it. He was still looking round him on the strange and horrid place, but he found himself when a cold corpse whispered in his ear, "Bury me now, bury me now. There's a spade and turn in the ground." Teig looked up from him He saw a spade lying beside the altar. He took it up, placed the blade under the flag, was the middle of the aisle, and leaning all his weight into the handle of the spade, he raised it. When the first flag was raised, it was not hard to raise the others near it. He moved 3 or 4 of them out of their places. The clay that was under them was soft and easy to dig, but he had not thrown up more than 3 or 4 shovelfuls when he felt the iron touch something soft like flesh. He threw up 3 or 4 more shovelfuls from around it, and he saw it was another body that was buried in the same place. "I'm afraid I'll never be allowed to bury 2 bodies in the same hole," said Teig, in his own mind. "The corpse there on my back," says he. "Will he be satisfied if I bury it down here?" But the corpse never answered him a word. "Oh, that's a good sign," said Teig to himself. "Maybe he's getting quiet." He thrust the spade down on the earth again. Perhaps he hurt the flesh of the other body. The dead man that was buried there stood up in the grave and shouted an awful shout. "Hoo, hoo, hoo! Go, go, or you're dead, 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 man!" And he fell back in the grave again. Teig said afterward that all the wonderful things he saw that night, that was the most awful to him. His hair stood up bright, and his head like the bristles of a pig. Cold sweat ran off his face, and came a tremor all over his bones, till he thought he must fall. But after a while he became bolder. He saw the second corpse remain quietly lying there. He threw the clay on it again, smoothed it overhead, laid down the flags carefully as they had been before. "It can't be he'll rise up any more," said he. He went down the aisle a little further, drew near to the door, began raising the flags again, looking for another bed for the corpse on his back. He took up 3 or 4 flags, put them aside, and he dug the clay. He was not long digging until he lay bare an old woman, without a thread upon her but her shirt. She was more lively than the first corpse, for he had seen scarcely taken any of the clay from about her when she sat up and began to cry. "Huh, you clown! Ha, you clown! Where has he been that he's got no bed?" Poor Teig drew back when she found that he was getting no answer. She closed her eyes gently, lost her vigour, and fell back quietly and slowly under the clay. Teig did to her as he done to the man. He threw the clay back on her, and left the flags drawn overhead. He began digging again near the door, but before he had thrown up more than a couple of shovelfuls, he noticed a man's hand lay bare by the spade. "By my soul, I'll go no further then," said he to himself. "What use is it for me?" And he threw the clay in it again, and settled the flags where they had been before. He left the church then, and his heart was heavy enough, but he shut the door and locked it, and left the key where he found it. He sat down on a tombstone that was near the door and began thinking. He was in great doubt what he should do. He laid his face between his 2 hands and cried for grief and fatigue. Since he was dead certain at this time he would never come home alive. He made another attempt to loosen the hands of the corpse that were squeezed round his neck. They were tight as if they were clamped, and the more he tried to loosen them, the tighter they squeezed him. He was going to sit down once more, and the cold, horrid lips of the dead man said to him, "Carrick fad chorus." You remember the command of the good people to bring the corpse with him to that place should he be unable to bury it where he had been. He rose up and looked around him. "I don't know the way," said he. As soon as he had uttered the word, the corpse stretched out suddenly, his left hand that had been tightened around his neck, and kept it pointing out, showing him the road he ought to follow. Teig went into the direction of the fingers were stretched, and passed out of the churchyard. He found himself in an old rutty stony road, and still again not knowing where to turn. The corpse stretched out his bony hand a second time, and pointed him onto another road, not the road which he had come when approaching the old church. Teig followed that road, and wherever he came to a path or road meeting it, the corpse always stretched out his hand and pointed with his fingers, showing him the way he was to take. Many was the crossroad he turned down, many was the crooked boreen he walked, until he saw from him an old burying ground at last, beside the road. But there was neither church nor chapel nor any other building in it. The corpse squeezed him tightly, and he stood. Bury me in the burying ground," said the voice. Teig drew over to the old burying place, and he was
not more than 20 yards from it when, raising his eyes, he saw hundreds and hundreds of ghosts, men, women, children, sitting on top of the wall round about, or standing on the inside of it, or running backward and forward and pointing at him, while he could see their mouths opening and shutting as if they were speaking, though he heard no word, nor sound amongst them all. He was afraid to go forward, so he stood where he was. The moment where he stood, all the ghosts became quiet and ceased moving. Then Teig understood that it was trying to keep him from going in. That they were. He walked a couple of yards forward, and immediately the whole crowd rushed together toward the spot to which he was moving. They stood so thickly together that it seemed to him that they could never pass. They could never break through them, even though he had a mind to try. But he had no mind to try it. He went back broken and dispirited. When he had gone a couple of yards from the burying ground, he stood again, for he did not know what way was to go. He heard the voice of the corpse in his ear saying, "Temple Ronan," and the skinny hand was stretched out again, pointing him the road. As tired as he was, he had to walk, and the road was neither short nor even. The night was darker than ever. It was difficult to make the way. Many was the toss he got, and many was the bruise they left on his body. At last he saw Temple Ronan from him in the distance, standing in the middle of the burying ground. He moved over toward it, and thought he was all right and safe, when he saw no other ghosts or anything else on the wall, and he thought he would never be hindered now from leaving the load off him at last. He moved over to the gate, but as he was passing in, he tripped over the threshold. Before he could recover himself, something that he could not see seized him by the neck, by the hands, and by the feet, and bruised him, and shook him, and choked him, until he was nearly dead. And at last he was lifted up and carried more than 100 yards from the place, and then thrown down in an old dyke, with the corpse still clinging to him. He rose up, bruised and sore, but he feared to go near the place again, for he'd seen nothing the time he was thrown down and carried away. "You corpse, up on my back," said he. "Shall I go over again to the churchyard?" But the corpse never answered him. "That's a sign you don't wish me to try it again," said Teig. He was now in great doubt as to what he ought to do, when the corpse spoke in his ear, and said, "Imlog Fada." "Oh, murder," said Teig. "Must I bring you there? If you keep me long walking like this, I'll tell you I'll fall under you." He went on, however, in the direction the corpse pointed out to him. Could not have told himself how long he had been there, and the dead man suddenly squeezed him and said, "There." Teig looked from him and saw a little low wall. It was so broken down in places that it was no wall at all. It was a great wide field from the road, and only 3 or 4 stones at the corners that were more like rocks than stones. There was nothing to show that there was either a graveyard or a burying ground there. "Is this Imlog Fada? Should I bury you here?" said Teig. "Yes," said the voice. "But I see no grave or gravestone, only this pile of stones," said Teig. The corpse did not answer, but it stretched its long, fleshless hand to show Teig the direction which he was to go. Teig went on accordingly. He was greatly terrified, for he remembered what happened to him at the last place. He went on, with his heart in his mouth, as he said himself afterward. But he came to within 15 or 20 yards. 15 or 20 yards of the little low, square wall, where it broke out a flash of lightning, bright and yellow and red, blue streaks in it, and it round about the wall in one course, and it swept by as fast as the swallow in the clouds. The longer Teig remained looking at it, the faster it went, till at last it became a bright ring of flame around the old graveyard, which no one could pass without being burned by it. Teig never saw, from the time he was born, and never saw afterwards, so wonderful and so splendid a light as that was. Round went the flame, white and yellow and blue sparks leaping out from it as it went, although first it had been no more than a thin narrow line. It increased slowly, until at last it was a great broad band, and it was continuously getting broader and higher, and flowing out more brilliant sparks, till there was never a colour on the ridge of the earth that was not to be seen in that fire, and lightning never shone, and flame never flamed that was so shining and so bright as that.
Teig was amazed. He was also half dead with fatigue, and he'd no courage left to approach the wall. There fell a mist over his eyes. There came a sorrowan over his head. Sorrown over his head. He was obliged to sit down on a great stone to recover himself. He could see nothing but the light, and he could hear nothing but the whir of it, as it shot round the paddock faster than a flash of lightning. As he sat there on the stone, the voice whispered once more in his ear, "Kill Bridget." And the dead man squeezed him so tightly that he cried out. He rose again, sick, tired, and trembling, and went forward as he was directed. The wind was cold, and the road was bad. The load upon his back was heavy, and the night was dark, and he himself was nearly worn out. As if he had very much farther to go, he must have fallen dead under his burden. At last the corpse stretched out his hand and said to him, "Bury me there." This is the last burying place, said Teig in his own mind. The little grey man said I'd be allowed to bury him in some of them. So it must be this. It can't be, but they'll let him in here. The first faint streak of the ring of day was approaching in the east, and the clouds were beginning to catch fire. But it was darker than ever. The moon was set, and there were no stars. "Make haste! Make haste!" said the corpse. And Teig hurried forward as well as he could to the graveyard. It was a little piece on a bare hill, with only a few graves in it. He walked boldly in through the open gate. Nothing touched him, nor did he hear or see anything. He came to the middle of the ground, and then stood up and looked round him for a spade or shovel to make a grave. As he was turning round and searching, he suddenly perceived what startled him greatly. A newly dug grave right before him. He moved over to it, looked down, and there at the bottom he saw a black coffin. He clambered down to the hole and lifted the lid and found that, as he thought it would be, the coffin was empty. It hardly mounted up the hole. It was standing on the brink when the corpse, which had clung to him for more than 8 hours, suddenly relaxed its hold on his neck, loosened its shins from round its hips, and sank down with a plop in the open coffin. Teig fell down on his 2 knees at the brink of the grave, and gave thanks to God. He made no delay then, but pressed down the coffin lid into its place, threw in the clay over it with his 2 hands. When the grave was filled up, he stamped and leaped on it with his feet, till it was firm and hard. Then he left the place. The sun was fast rising as he finished his work. The first thing he did was return to the road, and look out for a house to rest himself in. He found an inn at last, and laid upon the bed there, and slept till night. Then he rose up and ate a little, fell fast asleep again till morning. When he woke in the morning, he hired a horse and rode home. He was more than 26 miles from home where he was. He had come all that way, with the dead body on his back, in one night. All the people at his own home thought that he must have left the country, and rejoiced greatly when he saw them come back. Everyone began asking where he'd been, but he would not tell anyone except his father. He was a changed man from that day. He never drank too much. He never lost his money over cards. He especially would not take the world and be laid out by himself on a dark night. He was not a fortnight at home until he married Mary, the girl he'd been in love with. And it's at their wedding the sport was, and he was a happy man from that day forward. And it's all I wish we may be as happy as he was. That is all I have the energy and throat to read. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully it satisfies the itch for murder fairies. However, I still don't want to go to sleep. And so... Nah. I'm not gonna start streaming Inscription right now. I'll do that off stream. I'm gonna rest my voice a bit. In the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions, do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. I will see all of you wonderful people. Or am I? Fuck it. Let's do it. Oh, fuck it. I don't have self-control. Uh-oh. I just realized something. I'm wearing 2 sets of headphones. And I'm choking myself with one of the wires. Oh no. Wolfie. It's the murder fairies, Zerp. They got me. Seriously, what the fuck did I do? Oh, here we go. I was joking. Oh, were you joking? Were you now? Oh, I might just do it on the server. I don't think anyone has the burning desire to watch more footage of me playing Inscription. It's not like I've unlocked any more decks. So... that's weird. Oh, it sounds different to me, whatever. I mean... what's the uptime? Yeah, it's a decently long stream. Trust me, you guys will get more Inscription streams soon. But in the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions, do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. And take care, guys.